I walked into the interview room and I introduced myself to Gary Ridgway. And I said, Gary, I'm Dr. O'Toole from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. And the task force has asked me to stop by and see if you are worthy of being in the FBI's research. He was very eager. He said, oh, yes, I am. I'm very willing to talk about it. So he looked in the camera and he said,
I want to be the best serial killer out there and kill 100 this year.
Five of the most prolific serial killers in American history were all operating at the same time.
John Wayne Gacy's
Ted Bundy is still alive.
BTK.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
The Green River Killer.
This was the golden age of serial killing.
For years, the Green River Task Force has chased the ghost of a killer, too diabolically clever to catch.
There were a number of detectives who truly believed Gary Ridgway was the Green River Killer. But certainly we did not have the evidence to move forward with prosecution.
Serial killer Theodore Bundy is executed after nearly a decade on death row. Bundy was convicted of 3 brutal murders and was linked to dozens more.
I was glad when he was gone, but unfortunately, killing a serial killer doesn't stop them from being a serial killer. They did their damage.
It took the jury less than 2 hours to find John Wayne Gacy guilty of murdering 33 young men.
When he was sentenced to death, he didn't even blink. He didn't bat an eye, nothing. Now, that's a true sociopath. I mean, the guy was scary.
Serial killers, they're very arrogant and they think they're unstoppable. And that's what happened with Dahmer.
This kid had had a small hole drilled in his head and acid poured in, so he couldn't communicate with law enforcement.
They let Conorak go back into Jeffrey's apartment, and within an hour, he killed him.
Back in 1974, we couldn't even spell DNA, but at Josephine's feet, there was a pool. 31 years later, a genetic profile would be drawn from one of those preserved pieces of evidence.
BTK goes through this period where he does not kill for years.
And then in 1985, he kills his neighbor, Maureen Hedge. Well, they never dreamed this was BTK because BTK had disappeared.
Dennis Rader was a church-going, well-respected member of the community that hid this incredibly dark side. Now, there was a long period of time when Dennis wasn't active physically in killing. He was active mentally. He fantasizes about it. You can only fantasize so long before you cross that line. Once you've crossed that line, that is not a line you can come back from.
After he kills his neighbor, Maureen Hedge, and then Viktor Wegerly, BTK disappears again. He waits 5 more years until 1991 to kill again. And this is Dolores Davis.
My mom, she had gone out to eat, came back, and I know Mom's habit. She'd stay up till about 10 or so, and then she'd lock everything down, and she'd go to bed.
Rather than trying to break quietly into Dolores Davis's home, he just throws a cement block through her sliding glass door.
She came out of the bedroom and thought the car had hit her house, and I told her that I was on the run. After I tied her up, went through some things in the room there and then strangled her.
I got a call from my sister that next day saying that her house had been broken into and she was gone.
Dolores starts off as a missing person, but it's clear from her residence that something bad had happened.
The one thing that really stuck out to me, there was a half-eaten bowl of cereal on her countertop. I said, something's wrong about that. She never went to bed with a dirty kitchen, period. He thinks he's a comedian, so he ate a bowl of cereal to let everybody know that he was a serial killer. Isn't he a charming fellow?
Dolores D. Davis was abducted from her home. Her body was found 13 days later under a bridge in northern Sedgwick County. Davis had been strangled. Her feet, hands, and knees were bound with pantyhose.
They told us that they had found a white female. He said, quote, "We're 99% sure it's your mother." And that's troubling because if she wasn't recognizable, then that's hard to swallow. I came unglued. I just completely lost it.
His MO was bind, torture, kill, leave the body in the house. But Dolores Davis's body was found in a ditch. It just didn't fit.
From a police perspective, they're still dealing with homicides on a case-by-case basis. Something like a change in MO could really trigger the idea that this is not the same killer, that this is a one-off. So the police are not looking at BTK. He is not a suspect. In 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer is also flying under the radar of police.
Jeffrey Dahmer's victim selection, young gay men, racial minority, allowed him to evade law enforcement for a longer period of time because he knew on some level that this was a disenfranchised element of society that would go unnoticed were they to disappear.
All I would have had to do was just stop for several months at a time and space it out, but it didn't happen that way. I just was driven to do it more frequently and more frequently. Couldn't control it anymore.
Dahmer met Tracy Edwards outside the Grand Avenue Mall, and then they went to his apartment.
Dahmer said, "Why don't you come back to my place and I'll pay you some money to take some pictures of you and we can watch some movies."
And I thought about it and said, yeah, he's pretty cool. I guess it's all right to go have a beer because I thought he was an average guy. So he seemed normal to me, you know.
Dahmer offers Tracy a drink of rum and coke because Dahmer was out of the sleeping pills.
I had my head turned like this looking at the fish tank, you know. Before I know it, he threw a handcuff on me.
Tracy said, okay, there must be something wrong with this guy. I'm just gonna appease him and talk to him for a minute, especially when Dahmer pulled out this huge hunting knife. And Dahmer puts on The Exorcist 3 and they're watching it and Dahmer's humming and rocking back and forth, almost going into a trance and saying things to Tracy Edwards like, oh, you wouldn't believe what I've done and now I'm gonna do to you and I wanna eat your heart. He actually put his head up against Tracy Edwards' chest just to listen to his heartbeat because he wanted to hear it before he murdered him.
Like I knew that it was a life and death situation then, right? Yeah, it was me against him.
Eventually, Tracy gets loose, punches him, and he gets out of the apartment half naked wearing this one handcuff.
Mr. Edwards is able to run onto the street and flag down a squad. And those two officers first just tried to use their key that they had for their police handcuffs. That key didn't work. And so they went back to the apartment thinking that they're just going to get the key from Dahmer and take those handcuffs off, and that's going to be the end of it.
I'm in my house, and then I open up my door, and I'm looking out here, and I'm seeing the guy was at his door dangling this handcuff thing like this, and there's an officer standing there. And I hear people coming in the apartment. I hear a little bit of commotion over at his house.
One of the police officers goes in the bedroom and they see a drawer that's open.
They had no idea what they would find there. Didn't know there was a skull in the refrigerator. It was a death nest.